Oh, sorry, we're moving out of committee and into regular. Move from committee of the whole back into regular. Please, motion.
Sure.
Trustee Hero. Trustee McPherson. Exactly what I need. Just a note that anybody that's got a laptop that's obscuring a mic, if you go to speak, make sure you unobscure the mic. We want to hear everything you have to say. Report from private session. This is the report from June 18th. At that meeting, committee of the whole meeting, private session, we dealt with 2 contractual and 1 property matter. And both those items recommendations went on to be passed that evening. Report from committee of the whole public session. We received a presentation, a couple discussion items, and we passed a recommendation. Any comments or questions from that? Accountability framework.
Yes.
Chair, Mr. McMillan.
Okay, thank you. What I want to do is kind of take a step back so we can all kind of remember what we were all about in terms of the accountability framework. The accountability framework is designed to assess the effectiveness of the critical success factors as outlined in the board's strategic plan CREW, and to focus on strategies to measure key result indicators. And graduation rate is one of those key result indicators. The net promoter score that we were involved with last year and will again be involved in this year is another key result indicator. The one I want to talk about right now is the one that's probably next in line for us. It's the Ipsos Reid Student Staff Survey. We have been having lots of discussions with them in terms of getting the survey questions for staff and students to be exactly what we want. And I'll just go through a little bit of the details and the timelines of that for you. Ipsos Reid had been commissioned by every Canada District School Board to conduct a survey of the staff and the students. And the survey is going to take anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes in time. They have a tentative deadline for final responses to be in by November 28th, but I'll talk a little bit more about the timelines in a moment. Some of the key pieces of information that we're going to certainly communicate to the system is that the results are completely confidential. Results of the search will be reported back to the Upper Canada District School Board in aggregate terms only. And subgroup results will only be reported if the group is sufficiently large, for example, groups of 10 or more respondents. And varied in its responses to ensure that individual confidentiality is preserved, and that's so critical in this particular survey. The why behind the Ipsos Reid Student Staff Survey is to measure the effectiveness of the critical success factors as outlined in the strategic plan. And the purpose of the survey as a key result indicator is to get ongoing information for board consideration and exploration. It is not a quick fix to a specific problem. I think that's something that we want to communicate. We are gathering information for consideration and exploration for the trustees at the governance level. It is not intended to find a problem and fix it immediately. That is not the intent of the survey. We have some timelines that we discussed with Ipsos Reid. We're looking at meeting with them prior to the end of September. So we can go over looking at some of the specifics of what they're going to be doing. We're looking at a rolling out date late October, early November, and having it all conducted and finished by late November, with an approved report coming back to the board, a draft narrative report coming back at the end of November as well, and an approved report around December the 1st. So we're trying to get all of this done as quickly as we can, but at the same time, we want it to be thorough. The length is 10 minutes. One of the things we need to do is make sure we have all of our partnerships informed as to when we are going to actually start this and the amount of time that's involved. 10 minutes may seem fairly lengthy. It doesn't to me personally, but it can be. And what we're doing in this initial survey is exploring many areas to get sufficient baseline information. Sometimes your first survey can be a little bit longer than other surveys, simply to get that overall baseline information that we need. We have some timelines that we have to look at the Accountability Framework Committee. We're looking at a timeline in terms of communication rollout, because we feel that communication to the system is critical. And also communication to our partnerships, such as our administrators, and as well as this. I think it's very important that they understand why the trustees are doing this, what our intent is, and really to them, so they can pass it on to their teachers, the confidential nature of the survey. So we have some work ahead of us. I'm going to actually ask the chair to talk a little bit about a video presentation, and we've already talked to communications about this. The video presentation, really, the why behind it is to explain the process and the confidentiality of the survey and the intended purpose for us as trustees in the governance role. And if I can get you to just comment a few things about the video, that what you are looking for and what we're asking communications to get involved with.
Sure, thank you, Jeff. One of the things that was communicated to us quite directly by our meeting, in our meeting with the unions, was that they saw one concern that would limit the staff's comfort level in responding, and that was the notion that the information was confidential. We talked to the Ipsos Reid, and they recommended that finding as many ways as we can to ensure that we transmit that. So we're looking at a couple of videos. One video that would really visually establish the fact that it is not David or staff members here that are conducting the survey, that the survey is being conducted by an office in Ottawa. The servers are in Ottawa. The web server is in Ottawa. It's all behind secure doors. And David nor myself have the key to get in there and check the answers. So that is one of the videos is really going to work at visually enforcing that, so that people understand that whatever their answers are, they are secure. And we want as many people to respond as possible. It's going to be open to every staff member. We're not going to get every staff member, but we don't want them to not choose to participate because they think that somehow their answers are at risk and they would be compromised. The other video would talk more about the whole process and the value of the process to us. And we also want to make sure that people, if they choose not to participate, another reason is not that they don't see any value in the survey. This is a different survey for staff to answer because it's conducted by the governance body, not by administrative staff. So its purpose is different. The outcomes will be different. The way that it's looked at will be different. And so this is something new. We want to make sure that they understand that it is different. And that certainly too came out when we were in discussions or explaining to the unions, federations, what we wanted to do. That even at that point, we had to educate them on how this is very different from other surveys that they've participated in because it's coming from the governance body.
And just to do a follow-up on the Ipsos Reid, it was actually Ipsos Reid who suggested to us that perhaps we go to Ottawa with our camera and talk to them in their secure space to build even more confidence. And I've spoken to Terry and Derek, and I will make a trip with Derek up there, and we will have Ipsos Reid do a little part in the video, hoping the intent is to dispel any concerns that people would have in terms of how the information is collected and who has it. And the Ipsos Reid has been very open in terms of what they will do to ensure that everything is confidential. So that basically is where we're at.
And we have a meeting on
We do have,
Monday.
yes, we have a meeting on Monday, and then, you know, there's a group of us that usually always attend, but it certainly is open to anyone who wants to attend. That there's no way the accountability framework is a closed shop. It never was intended that way, never will be that way. So you certainly are welcome to stick around. We'd love to have your company.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. One of the components to that I might just add on that came out of the budget discussion was the director and I presented a cyclical chart of reports, and we're looking forward to that starting in the next meeting with our communication department. Also, you will all have missed the presentation of two principals at this meeting. That's going to start up on the 22nd of October. And I think that's pretty well it. Okay, we'll move now to the next item, which is a report from our director of the Ontario Public School Boards, David McDonald.
Thank you. It'll be a very brief one this evening. There's not a lot to report on, but we'll give you an update from the AGM that occurred in July. You timing me? Yeah. Don't get me started. I'm not the director. Wasn't paying attention there. Our elections were held at the AGM. It was a pretty good AGM overall. I think there were some good speakers and some speakers that were on the edge of being questionable whether it was relevant to what we were doing. You always have those types of situations that do occur. I'm happy to say that through the process, again, Upper Canada is represented well within OPSPA. I am your director, but I'm also the vice chair of the Eastern Region. I'm not sure if that's the right title or not, quite honestly, but in any event, I'm the vice chair of the Eastern Region. We also have representation on the policy and program team with Trustee McAllister and Trustee Karkner, and also representation on the First Nations with Trustee Garrow. So well represented. I think there really wasn't too many surprises overall. Michael Barrett is returning as our president. He was acclaimed. And our first vice and second vice did a swap. So Lori French from Kingston, or Limestone board, is now the first vice as opposed to being second vice, and Mark Bailey is now our second vice. So a good meeting, a good session overall, good opportunity to network with trustees across the province, and obviously this was tied into the Canadian School Board Association, so a good opportunity to get some experience and camaraderie with trustees from across Canada. Our Board of Directors meeting is scheduled for the next week, which would be the 19th and 20th in Toronto. Lots of items to be discussed at that time, obviously labor relations being one of them, but lots of things happening within the ministry still. As recent as yesterday, the ministry sent out a funding consultation guide for education. So OPSPA staff is looking through that. Obviously our mandatory or our automatic response is that we do have our GSN working document that we provide to the government on an annual basis around funding. We're going to use that, but we'll also be looking at the document, reviewing it, and providing further response. There will be face-to-face meetings conducted with the ministry and stakeholders. OPSPA will be part of that. I'll send that out. I'm not sure if you've received it or not, but I'll make sure that it's attached to some of our information. Have a look at it. If you have any information that you or concerns that you want to share, and I can bring back to OPSPA, certainly please let me know, and I'll do that. So, despite activity that's happening within the province, we've got a majority government. It could be interesting to see what happens with the majority government and where we're headed in education overall. So certainly have an update for you in our next meeting after our Board of Directors. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Any comments or questions? Trustee Carpenter?
In one of the OPSPA mailings, there was a report of meetings being held with the minister for the directors. In September, there's one in Ottawa, 25th and 26th. Is that strictly for directors?
I understand at this particular time it's all hands on deck for directors and selected supervisory officers.
Yeah. Part of the PD so they're going to discuss this education document as well, funding document, as part of the PD for senior board staff at the 6 regional symposiums in September, October, which I believe is what you're referring to.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's senior board staff.
Okay.
It sounded like they were going to include chairs, but in one of the briefs that I got, but I never could figure out.
At code, I asked that chairs be there.
But
I think they're trying to keep us apart.
okay, no further questions for our director. I'll move then to 8.04, which is discussion on staffing. Trustee Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'm proposing it for 2 or 3 reasons. One is the accountability framework experience that we've been going through shows clearly, more clearly for me at any rate, the activities of the board, and I would like to see it extended to the areas of staffing and budget, particularly the staffing beyond the high school level. I think that the mantra should be no more hiring, and let us attempt to make do with what we have. The Premier has said no more money. Mr. Sandals has said there's no more money. It could be an opportunity to be more of an executive authority as a board at the local level. And Minister Sandals has told us at the annual meeting that she would like to see more executive authority by boards, and has moved to do that with the organization of the Ontario Public School Boards Association as the accounting agency or the bargaining agent. And so I would like to have clarity there in those people who are not involved in the daily teaching, and I would like to see us stop, do the accountability, then move forward. So I'm calling for a moratorium, Mr. Chairman, on any further hiring at central office.
Okay, any comments, questions? Trustee McPherson?
Is there an anticipated time frame on this?
Trustee Buckland?
I don't have one, no.
Trustee McAllister?
I have a great deal of sympathy actually for the motion as proposed for a number of reasons. We have the director has introduced a new structural organization for the board, which I think is a very good one, and there have been other changes in the board and in the office in recent weeks and months and whatnot due to retirement, etc. I think it might be a time to consolidate, to stand back and to adjust to the change that we are undergoing at the present time, to provide us with a little bit of stability. I look at this as a trustee because we have several mandates under regulation. I think it's 169 of the Education Act, and that is, we have a responsibility essentially to manage the resources that are given to us by the government inherently by the taxpayer. So that is one of the things that that I think I'm in sympathy with. The second thing that which is not in the report, but the administration may want to consider it, and that is an examination, perhaps by an outside source, of positions that we have presently at the central office. And I'm hoping I'm not spreading fear, because that is not the intent at all. Just an examination of what we're doing, what we need, and what we have, and what we need further or less of. So those are my thoughts on that issue.
Trustee McMillan?
Through you, Chair. You know, when I think about this, the system has gone through a tremendous amount of change at the moment. And I certainly agree with Trustee McAllister in that the model has a lot of promise. But I think we're in a state of a lot of change, and to add even more change now may not be beneficial. And I think maybe what would be beneficial to the system right now is a cooling off period of time when we just let things settle and let the dust settle and let the employees settle into the new roles of what's happening. And I think Trustee Buckland probably are onto a good thing in terms of just keeping things where we are right now and not bringing any more change to a system that's undergone a lot of change in a very short period of time.
Trustee McDonald, is that a finger up or?
Yeah, just checking the sites. If there's nobody else, yeah.
Trustee McPherson?
I'll defer to David.
Trustee McDonald?
I'm struggling with this one. I think we pass a budget, we have a process in place. I'm not afraid of change. I think change is good. But what still comes back to haunt me a little bit is what happened last year. So I like the process that we have, that we want to invest in a budget, because I think that's a time when we should justify to ourselves what positions need to be created, what positions are important to the organization. So perhaps we want to build that further into our budget process moving forward. But as I said, I keep coming back to where we were last year. Last year at this time, we were faced with a really difficult task and situation that put us into a potential deficit. And that potential deficit had nothing to do with hiring people. It had a lot to do with not getting enough students at that particular time. So it was the revenue. It wasn't the expense side of things, it was the revenue. So, you know, I struggle with, do we need to do this? I struggle with making sure the process is fixed. But then the reality hits me knowing that we had this situation last year. And we're at a very tight line right now in our financial stability to make sure that we don't have those situations again. So, you know, how do we ensure that we get all the revenue that we have without knowing whether the expenses are going to exceed that? So, I think it's almost imperative at this point that until we know, have a great understanding of what the revenue situation is, we need to put the reins on some of our expenses just to make sure that we don't end up with that situation. I don't want to be in fear as a trustee. I don't want to be in fear as a board, but I do come back and recall that situation that we were in last year. So from a hiring standpoint, I understand that. It's very political motivated. I get that. So when I think of making sure that we put the reins on, I'm also wondering, you know, should we be making a blanket statement saying we need to make sure that we are very cautious on where we're hiring, what we're hiring for, the money that is being expended within the organization at a certain level. I think we need to understand whether do we need to embark on that for the next period of time, a short period of time, to make sure that we get our accounts in place and where we need to be. So, you know, I still struggle with it. I'm not quite certain where I want to be, but I want to make sure that we don't get faced with that situation in a month's time. I don't want it to sound political for my political future or our own political future, but now is not the time to have surprises as a Board of Trustees. And we need to make sure that we're on the same page. We need to make sure that we don't have those surprises. And, you know, I think Trustee Buckland makes a good point that we need to make sure we look at that. So my question to the group now is that what really we want to do? And if we're going to do that, do we need to look at further measures? And I throw the comment out because I think if we're going to stop at one level and instill the confidence in our communities, maybe we need to make sure that we're looking at a broader scope.
Any other comments? Trustee Carpenter?
As Trustee Buckland said, he doesn't want to see this affecting our schools in any way. My question is, we don't have the information yet as to what our enrollment like and what our receipts are going to be. So I think just stopping for a while and just having a look at what we have to deal with. I've heard in some of my schools that we've had growth and others that we've had staying the same. So I don't know whether that's happening throughout the board or not. So I think gathering that kind of information would give us a better standing as to where we are with our budgets and what's coming in before we start putting out additional monies that we might not be able to afford down the road.
I'm gonna need some clarity on what it is actually that we're gonna ask to be done here in a minute, so, Trustee McPherson?
That basically covers one of my questions, was to the width and breadth of this. The other question is on process. Given that we are passing this motion or may not pass it, it will move on to the next Board of Trustees. If we do not put a finite limit on it, like a timeline, will it require a 2/3 vote to rescind that motion? If we, say, a year and a half down the road, we feel comfortable enough to say we don't need this restriction anymore.
Any motion a board makes does not die with the board and would require whatever
But it would require.
same test.
Yeah.
Same test.
So, would there be any consideration to putting it into a time frame? Just out of curiosity.
Okay, somebody want to help clarify, Trustee Buckland?
Well, my rule of thumb on that, trustee person, would be the winter enrollment. We're going to get an enrollment immediately, and once we have the winter enrollment, then we're assured of the budget based on per student capital. So that would be where I would put it. I don't know when that enrollment is available.
So, can I infer that, or interpret that as meaning that we are talking of a system-wide freeze? Like, that not just restricted to any part of the board, but the entire structure of the Upper Canada District School Board, whether it be classroom, whether it be custodial, whether it be administrative. Is that the intent of this motion?
Trustee McAllister, Director.
Perhaps Trustee Buckland, but may I defer to him first, please?
My thought was central office solely.
So administrative.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me for speaking out of turn.
Okay, Director?
First of all, as you know, we're going to do what you direct me to do. I just want to remind you, as you shape this motion, where if this is the central office, yes, there's some things that we can do, but when you look down at the other end of the table, this is a very different looking table than it was a year ago, and certainly 5 years ago, as you go through. Here at the central office, I think that we will be doing some things without question. I'm not asking to buy time or whatever time. I believe that 89 to 90% of this will be in our collective agreements. And my thoughts are, and I don't want to draw anybody else into this, is I do believe that we should see the revenue side before we get too deep in this. And then the question of, from my perspective, is that the new model that Trustee McAllister's talked about is leaner. And I think we have to give it a run to see, because we don't want it leaner and not effective. Because you don't want something brand new and then you find out that the horse doesn't run or the dog doesn't hunt. And I think what we have to do is give us a bit of time. But I also believe that we should be always analyzing where we can go. In fact, I would say from my perspective, in two of Jeremy's departments, we're continually taking a look at, do we need this one? Could we be more effective here? Or do we need this assignment at all? And we continue to do that as we go through. And at the same time, I believe the province is broke. They're going to tell us in the collective bargain they have no money, and there may be some things that come down telling us what we are to do. So being prepared for that's a good idea too.
Trustee McAllister?
Just to clarify, what my understanding of the motion is that it does not apply to classroom, teachers, EAs, custodians, etc.
I did
You
not,
are referring to central office staff, correct?
Yes, I did not intend that.
Right. I'm wondering if a friendly amendment would be 6 months, to say the end of March. Would that be too much of a handcuff?
There's no mover and a seconder yet, just a point of order.
Yeah, we don't really have a motion on the floor yet, so I'm putting one together. So if you guys want to keep talking, I'll try to gather what I'm hearing and then float something. Are there any other comments about this?
Maybe
go ahead.
I'd like to ask the director, if I could, what he thinks about that time frame of, say, 6 months, because that would comprehend the revenue period and with the winter, the second semester enrollments, et cetera, would it not?
First of all, on this, we'll respect the time that you give us. 6 months would answer some of the questions that Trustee McDonald raised about. We would solidly have our revenues in. We would clearly have a mandate for the number of kids that we have, which is our revenue source. And we would clearly have a handle on the number of foreign students who have impacted on the budget. And we certainly would have a much better understanding of this budget coming up of the impact that because we've fully implemented all-day kindergarten and all those things in there, it'll be a much more precise, I think, way to look at to get leaner.
So if I had to ask for a definition, if I was trying to write something that would include, I'm not sure, like board staff gets unfairly hit because they work from the board, but there are a lot of jobs that are non-school, non-instruction, non-school-based, non-instruction, that I think is what you're talking about, right? So regional offices, that kind of thing?
Well, administrative is my thought.
Administrative.
Management.
Go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
Just to pick up on some of the points that were stated since I last spoke, I think it's important that we understand our expenses, but we also have a mission to move forward and educate children. We do have a collective agreement, several collective agreements that we need to honor. So we can't put ourselves into a situation that would create defending something that we really have no opportunity to defend if a collective agreement says something has to happen. As well, we know that there are this time of year, there are a number of students that are going through a process that may need additional support. We may need additional staff. This is the time when we're gonna put staff into schools because all of a sudden, those kids have come through. So we need to make sure that that process is put in place, because again, it is a collective agreement situation that if we have class size issues. We also need to make sure that we have an ability to put EAs in our classrooms. At the end of the day, we have a duty to be, fiscally responsible and make sure that we spend the money properly and get it proper, and put it into our system. But we also have a duty to educate our children. So the two can't compete with each other in a sense that we are risking the education of our kids. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is if it's a non-classroom, non-educational, direct impact, whatever the word terminology we use, that we still have the ability as an organization to deliver education to our kids. But what we're trying to do is just make sure that we have an understanding of where we might be going on the expense side of thing at a certain level of our staffing. So I get that. And I just hope that when we're looking at the spending that we move forward and identify it. We did a Quest 2020 a number of years ago that identified staff allocation, the number of people that we had in our system. And I think, there was benefits to that, and we did one prior to the Quest 2020, which was, your director's introduction into our system fairly early on. I think there's an opportunity for us to, if we believe that we need to do that, then we should give the mandate to the director to say we'd like to see that built into our budget process moving forward. I want to harp on that a little bit. I'm not really in a position that if we're going to put a freeze on hiring, then we hire a consultant to come in and tell us what we should do. So I think we've got the capacity internally to be able to do that. Because we want to be in a situation that if we're saying we're not going to hire more people or create new positions, we also don't want to go out and hire consultants. So that's an important aspect that I think we need to make sure that we build it into our process for the budget if that's what we're looking for. So give the direction to the director to say, have some of that information available for us come May, June, whatever the case might be, if we're looking for those types of things. And I think that can be something that would be built in over the next 8 months, 10 months.
Okay, so I would, just to keep things germane, I would prefer to deal with the expenditure as a separate motion. Okay. Otherwise, it's just convoluted. Trustee McPherson, just 1 second, just to answer your question about a motion to rescind. A motion to rescind requires the same majority vote that it took to enact it. So if it took a simple majority to enact the motion, then it takes a simple majority to rescind it. Okay. I think that we want to be careful that we don't tie our hands too much, and I think we need to make it understood that if something happens and, we need to hire somebody, there are some positions that if they were emptied, that we would need to replace just operationally that may get caught up in this. I think we have to give the director somewhat recourse to come to the board or whatever to get that, because I don't want to create where we have something happen, have a position become available and not be able to fill it because of this. So I think we need to make sure that we have some sort of understanding.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's the occasion where the ministry mandate may be forced on us with their funding. I mean, that we don't want to miss out on these opportunities. So that shall not be covered by my moratorium mantra. Objection to that.
So far, on the timing thing, do we wanna just give it a period of time, or do we want to maybe look at renewing it monthly, renewing it every 2 months, or, I mean, it may come to a point where, you know, if all of a sudden we find that things are good and they send us $100 million, we might wanna, change it, so we could look at that kind of schedule too. Somebody, Trustee Garrow?
I would think that after the elections, that there might be something that the new board or, you know, around the table should consider. Should look at it. If the motion is passed.
Does somebody wanna, okay, go ahead, Trustee McAllister.
I still like the 6-month deadline, so I was going to say 1st of March or whatever, to be followed by a report by the director at that time, giving us his assessment of where we feel we stand.
Yep, go ahead, Director.
First of all, I think that would accomplish a couple of things. Trustee McDonald's alluded to two rationalizations that we went through in services at the board office and field offices before. One was really post-amalgamation, where we really did have to rationalize services and transportation, a number of areas where it was considered by many that we had duplication. I think we certainly covered that. It was not a popular time for some of us, but it was done. We had another one in Quest 2020. We had an expert look at what we're doing, and again, there was a rationalization. And as the chair has talked about, we actually moved resources into places. For example, IT became critical. Issues in IT, we had more people going there. But as I speak to you right now, not to draw any attention to any department, but we have real changes going on in where we need people and potentially where we do not. And this may be the opportunity in a budget preparation to take a look at that. And I think that time, we will have our October numbers secure at that time with all of the TR Leger issues. And then by that particular time, you talked about the end of March, we would have our second revenue sources in. Superintendent Barkley would have that by that particular time to make a hard look. And what we could do, and I think this is the direction through a really good question, is tell you the head counts and the areas where potentially that we think that we would make some moves to either consolidate, and I think we'd also know politically, budget-wise, hopefully where collective bargaining is going as well, as Trustee McDonald says well, because 89 to 90% of this is all tied up in collective agreements as we take a look at this. So that good question, saying, you know, how can we best serve the community in an effective and balanced return on investment manner, which I think is where I hear this going, would be a good report to start off with real serious budget deliberations.
Lisa, can you tell me what the first meeting is in March, please? And do you have the timelines for, I'm seeing if I can link it up with one of our cyclical reports that would meet the questions. For March 11th, do you have a list of from MC on the cyclical reports? Because I know we're due to receive sort of a financial update every 3 or 3 months or something. So if it's close to that, we could have that. So that's essentially what you're asking for, Trustee McAllister, is a statement of revenues and expenses?
No,
No?
not really.
Okay.
But I'm really hoping at the end of the 6-month period that the director may be in a position to provide us with information assessing how the freeze is working, where he perceives the needs to be, where the consolidations can be made, etc., or not. So I'm not necessarily tying it into revenue expenditures.
That's essentially what we're doing in the motion.
Through you, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, trustee Swan.
Are you essentially asking for a kind of service delivery review, Trustee McAllister?
I guess that would be inherent in in my approach, yes.
And it's been often referred to about the 2020 review. Can I add a recommendation in this information, or just probably not as part of the motion, but as an election is nearing and a new board of trustees is coming on, perhaps I'd just like to suggest that they get a copy of the 2020 review, the new board.
We can put that in the library.
Thank
We
you.
have a financial forecast due in March. So report on. So does everybody want to see this report? Like, is that general? Is that the way people want to handle this? Yeah, Trustee McDonald.
You're asking if we want to see a report?
Yeah, I want to make sure that I'm not writing this and then have you guys, then I have it only be John that's interested in it.
Can I speak to the,
I mean, John's important, but yes, go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
I guess I'm concerned. No, I am not. I guess I'm concerned. I am concerned about the 6 months. I think it's important for us to do what we're doing moving forward to make sure that we have a check. The worry that I have on 6 months is well, why not make it till the end of June, which means theoretically we're saying no spending as a result of this budget year. Because if we come into March and we say, okay, we can remove it, we've got a few months left of the school year, a few months left of the entire budget year, but majority of our spending is done within the 10 months of the school year. So if we're saying that we don't want to have any hiring, should we be saying that we're having it through the whole school year, or should we be realistic and come back and say we need to see a report a little bit sooner? Because I just worry that in 6 months we're going to be through the year, and it's really pointless at that point to hire anybody. We should be looking at the next budget year if that's the case. So, I thought my simple thinking was that we would kind of keep a monitoring of this. We would look at it and see where we go. If we want to look at a complete service delivery review or those types of things, I said it earlier, I think we need to provide the mandate and build it into the budget so that it becomes part of that process that, if Director Thomas wants to hire 12 new superintendents, he needs to have a business case built for it and put into the budget. I know I'm being facetious, I wouldn't say that you do. But it needs to be part of that process. That's a significant impact on our overall spending, and we need to make sure that we develop that process moving forward. If we have a vision of only hiring somebody partway through a year, it still can be part of a budget process so that we know what the impacts are going to be. So I'm very reluctant to trying to have something that's separate from our budget process. I'd like to try to tie them in together so that if we can do that as we approach the April, May, June, maybe this is the kickoff to it, and I'm okay with that. But I hope that we can tie it in, and I'm worried and cautious about the 6 month piece. That's all.
Trustee McAllister?
Just to respond to your concern, Trustee McDonald, one does not preclude the other. I believe that in effect what we will be doing is preparing the launch pad for the budget deliberations, and we'll be in a position to then better assess what is going on.
Okay, Trustee Carpenter?
When is, are we supposed to get quarterly reports in reference to budget?
Yes.
When is that next one?
First one is December. It falls hot on the tails of really that gives them time to get the revenue stream verified with the head count. Okay. So I'm still a little fuzzy on this report subject. So I need some help. So what I have right now is board to set in place a motion to not fill any existing positions or create any new positions that are administrative or any new positions that are administrative or managerial and are not school-based. Motion to expire March 11th upon receipt of a report on, and that's where I've got. Go ahead.
Rather than use the word expired, I'd use the word review.
Well, I think review is convoluted. I mean, either the motion ends on that or it doesn't. So I think that you can always put in a new motion. So
Okay.
I just think that review then suggests that, well, what exactly has to happen to get rid of it? You vote, you'd have to vote to rescind them? I just think that would be muddy. So I think if we're gonna make it 6 months, then it's 6 months, it expires on the 11th upon receipt of the report. The two have to go together. You have to have the receipt of the report, and we have to be on March 11th. March 11th comes and you don't have the report, then it's still in effect. That would be the way I would read it. But I need to know what this report says. Report on challenges, opportunities.
Yeah, I see that as opportunities of elimination of some aspects, of consolidation of others. At the time of the 6-month deadline, there may also be pointed out to us that we need to increase. But that really goes beyond my notion.
So what we're doing now, essentially, just to summarize, is we're going to put a stop on hiring or filling positions. But we're also asking for essentially a review. And if I listen to what was said at the beginning as the rationale for this, what I understood the rationale was that to ensure that we had the revenues to support our expenses and that we would essentially take a cautious conservative approach to the hiring of or replacement of staff. But we've now moved in this now review of staff. And that's a separate thing, right? Like now we're going on to something in addition. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to split this up a bit, and if we want to ask the director to do a review of staffing levels at the board office, then I think we do that separately and not tie it to this, because otherwise I think we're convoluting sort of that's in my mind as to what was expressed at the beginning as the rationale for doing this. And that would make it more consistent with what you started out with, Mr. Buckland.
That's fine.
So unless somebody vehemently objects, that's the what I'm gonna go right now, okay? I'm just gonna go strictly, and I'm gonna put a motion on the floor that deals with so-called freeze. So let's get that language right. Board, the Upper Canada District School Board will put in place a directive to not fill any existing positions or create any new positions that are of the administrative or managerial type and that are not school-based. Motion to expire March 11th. And at that point, on March 11th, you can put the motion back in again if so desired. Now, I want to make sure that we haven't set something up that is going to create problems. And I mentioned that we would want to give David the capacity to come and essentially say, listen, I need to do this, so help me out. I don't know whether we need to add that to the motion. I think that, I guess you could just come and just say, hey, you know, I know I have this, but I need and you could just write an exclusion to supersede the motion. I don't see any. You're the expert here, Shayla. You better be helping me out. I don't see any procedural reason why I can't, why you can't do that. The only other thing that I would want to make sure is that we're not creating a problem for any position that we're currently in the process of filling, so that we create a legal problem there. So maybe the simplest question is, are you in the process of filling any positions of this nature?
Potentially one or two.
Potentially, or are you in the process?
We will be. We have a couple of major holes moving forward. Jeremy, you have one, a big one in facilities, and potentially I have one.
Okay, so that you will have to deal with then as a side matter. I don't want to create
Through you,
a.
Chair.
I'm gonna just put in a proviso, just so that you don't wake up tomorrow and say, oh yeah, there was that position. So not to be applied to any currently advertised position. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, does that work?
So you got
It's done.
Yes, go ahead, Trustee Swan.
No, it's Trustee McRae.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Trustee McCray.
I completely understand the need for us to be cautious, the need to us to ensure that this decision will not have any implication in the class, the importance that we need to stay on tab with our budget. But what I'm having a hard time understanding is why we are putting ourselves in the position of what I believe is the director's role. And that is to make the decisions regarding the staff needs and what those are and how those could change, especially since the landscape has completely changed with this movement and this direction that we're going. I heard this evening in listening to everyone that by December we will have a good indication of how our revenues are coming in accordance to our attendance. I might add at that time that when we get that, or into January, that might be a good time for there to be a report on the savings that we have had, how it's working out, other ways we might save or prevent losses of money, opportunities, all those types of things. And I just think that we need to kind of trot along that way and, check our pluses and our minuses as we move forward. But for us to
make a blanket statement and a motion that really, to me, is tying the hands of our director, who's in the best position with his human resources person to identify some of those changes that might have to happen, and for him then to, you know, be in touch with you or to be in touch with members of the trustee to check this out. Like, let the man do his job. I really think we're making an error here. I understand the reason why, and I understand we have to be cautious. But, you know, tonight we talked about trust and how he trusted us with self-disclosing information on particular situations. We need to have trust in him as well. I'm not in favor of this, and I'm just letting you know.
Okay, thank you, Trustee McCray. So the motion that I have, and I'm gonna now look for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Buckland. Are you moving this? I move it. Seconded by Trustee McAllister. That the Upper Canada District School Board put in place a directive to not fill any existing positions or create any new positions that are of the administrative or managerial type and are not school-based, not to be applied to any current advertised position. Motion to expire March 11, 2015. Okay, any comments? Go ahead, Trustee McPherson.
I have a wee problem with putting a finite time on it. Given that we can rescind the motion, it's within our power. I question the need to have it expire. It's basically, I guess it falls back to the comfort level of the board. To me, the whole cost-saving process, whether it's this or something else, needs to be applied through our budget cycle. In other words, picking up a wee bit in what Second Vice Chair McDonald said, this needs to follow our budget process. And so I have a wee bit of a problem saying such and such a date in March, it ends. And so given the fact that all we need is a 50% plus one majority, we can adjust it at a later date as the needs arise or so. After we have received quarterly reports, after we have seen how the new administrative structure works with the coordinating area principals, we'll have a lot more information then than we do have now. So it's just a comment.
I think, if I might, I think that structurally, that in a motion like this, which is, as has been identified, restrictive, I think you have to put some force on the board to revisit it, to make sure that it just doesn't hang there. You know, if you don't, then it could very easily just, you know, slip away on you, and you know, it just hangs and hangs and hangs. And I know you can rescind it, but I don't know. To me, this just kind of ensures that it's actually dealt with. Trustee McAllister?
Just comment on your concern, Trustee McPherson. I think the second part of the motion will address your concern, which means that we will be conducting a review, at least we'll be hearing a review report from the director at the end of that final period, so that we can then proceed. So one really is tied to the other, but we haven't done that.
All right, any other comments or questions? Let's call the question then. Okay, that passes with one opposed. Right, trustee McAllister, you want to talk about the report?
Yes, I think you want to split the motion, so
Yep.
I guess what I'm proposing is that as of March 31st, that the director be asked to report on the status of this and effect of this hiring freeze. And that we assess at that time, at least he assesses with us and for us, the challenges, needs, and opportunities facing the board.
Opportunities.
Challenges, needs, opportunities.
March 31st, I think is what you have, right? By March 31st, or by March 1st?
I think we've got 11th in this.
I guess March
Previous
11th.
motion, we should continue it into the second motion.
Yes, I
And
agree.
have it before it's gonna expire on that date, if we have a report.
Prior to.
Yeah, it needs to be prior to.
It should be, prior to that expiring.
So by the February, just give me the date for the February meeting,
25th is the board meeting.
25th. By the February 25th. Okay. Motion that the Upper Canada School Board direct the director to report on the status and effect of the hiring freeze, including challenges, needs, and opportunities by February 25th, 2015. Okay, you know what, like, referencing the hiring freeze is not really we can be better. So let's say the effect of the directive passed, with the directive with regards to hiring passed whatever today's date is. And then that way, maybe there's some other motion that was a hiring freeze at some other point.
Through you, Chair?
Yep.
Can we just ensure that it also says that this has nothing to do with the schools. This has to do with administration in our subsidiary offices, right?
Yep.
So I think that wording should be in there.
Yeah, I think it would be duplicative to put it in this one too, because it's already in the other one, and we're referencing the directive directly now. So
Okay.
the first motion includes that, and the second one, direct the director to report on the status and effect of the directive.
I just hate someone to pull one up and it's going to look like we have a hiring freeze in the Upper Canada District School Board. That's all.
Yeah, no, it does not say that anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the motion passed. That's better. That's better language. Thank you. The effect of the motion passed September 10th. Effective we have to include with respect to hiring.
Excuse me,
Yep.
can I just reference the agenda item number, 80, whatever?
We don't have, do we? Can we do that? Okay, well then put the number in. Sorry, that makes sense. That's good. Board director to report on the status and effect of the motion passed, respect to agenda item number 4, including challenges, needs, and opportunities by February 25th, 2015, moved by trustee McAllister, seconded by trustee Carpenter. Go ahead. And
Can we assume that effectiveness includes budget? I mean, that's the emphasis. budget savings. If it can, then leave it. But that's my emphasis.
With a focus on budget, with a focus, including challenges, needs, and opportunities, with a focus on budget implications by February 25th, 2015.
Good.
Does that need it?
Good.
Okay, so I'll reread the motion. Moved by trustee McAllister, second by trustee Carpenter, that the Upper Canada District School Board director to report on the status of an effective motion passed September 10th, 2014 with respect to agenda item 804, including challenges, needs, and opportunities with a focus on budget implications by February 25th. No late. That's fine. Technically, that means that it couldn't occur on February 25th, right? If it says by February 25th. So, on or before. On or before. Okay,
Say our board meeting up and
we got it. I think this is good. I think we got it. Okay, call the question. Okay, trustee McCray. We have one abstention and one opposed. I'm opposed. And one abstention. Trustee McCray abstains and all the others are in favor. Okay. Let's go. Your idea of expenditures. Move on to that.
Well, I just think in overall, if we're looking at this as this, I mean the hiring pieces that we're looking at, you know, we need to understand what else could put us into jeopardy from an expense standpoint. So what are we doing? If this is really what we're focusing on, then what are we doing to make sure that we have the emphasis on those expenditures? So, you know, how do we not tie the hands of administration to do the day-to-day activities? But how do we make sure that we're not signing up for $1 million expenditure that may cause us some issues? So what's the level, the balancing effect of that type of exercise? And I'm not sure how to do that, or I'm not sure where we are. I mean, there are procedures in place for us to make sure that we go out and get the best price all the time, and I'm confident that that works. But what do we need to do to make sure that we're living up to the original intent of what Trustee Buckland said from a hiring freeze, creating a concern, while our overall expenditures sometimes create those issues as well. So not just from a hiring standpoint, but overall expenses. I mean, we have some pretty big capital expenses that are underway from additions and those kinds of things, but how can we get our head around those types of things, or do we need to get our head around those types of things?
Trustee McPherson?
Did we not, through the chair, did we not pass a motion in conjunction with the budget approval in June? I believe John brought it forward after the fact about seeking cost savings and in the budget for 2014. I don't have that motion in front of me, so I'm just wondering if that would in part cover off some of what David is thinking about.
We passed a motion around developing a plan around the accumulated surplus. That's what the motion was in reference to. So what is the appropriate amount and a plan to achieve that? And that's ongoing. We didn't give a timeline, I guess, but there, we didn't. But I know that the work is ongoing for that.
Maybe there's no appetite, I just, I raise the issue because as I said, we have expenses, so if we raise the question around those hiring, do we need to ensure that we're controlling those expenses moving forward? What do we want to do? Do we want to see monthly reports on the expenses and then review them so that we have an opportunity to react if we need to? I'm just trying to make sure the horse isn't out of the barn situation. And again, I'm not going in fear, but it's a situation that I want to make sure that we're all, we're looking at the same thing. Hiring is one aspect. So if we're concerned about overall expenses, I guess making sure that we don't move forward, is this something that we should be looking at?
Go ahead, Trustee McMillan.
Through you, Chair. I agree with you. I think our concern in terms of the creation of new positions or filling positions, or we want to get that under control because we're concerned about how close we were to the budget line in terms of compliance. And I think as a Board of Trustees, we all know that we have a huge responsibility in terms of the accountability of the spending in this board and the budget. And if we are concerned right now that the budget could be threatened because of spending in areas that aren't necessarily under our control, however the budget is, then I think we have to address that. And I think, when we started off by looking at, we've got to put a kind of a hold on the creation of new positions, costly positions, because they could threaten the budget. I think we're also in a position right now of other expenditures that we as a Board of Trustees have an absolute right to know about, especially if they're going to put us in a position where we are not going to be in compliance, or we have to make cuts to get into compliance. And so I have no problems at all with Trustee McDonald asking the question, should those reports come to us? We talk about evidence-based decision-making, we talk about evidence-based budgeting. We have no problem with spending. Show us the evidence and the reason why we should be doing what we're doing. So I have no problem with what you're saying right now.
I'm trying to envision how you would structure that. That's the...
Through you, Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
We have monthly reports, monthly financial updates, and we have monthly capital and facility project reports that are on every agenda. Possibly as part of our agenda, that would be an opportunity for discussion over concerns or challenges that we are having with our budget. So rather than them just being put on the agenda, that would be something that we would discuss on a monthly basis.
Director?
First of all, I think this is prudent conversation to have. And I think that if we're looking to at the horizon to see if we can see a catastrophe or an earthquake coming up, I think it's difficult. But an earthquake would be a change in transportation where you say we want to compete for every single seat and we're going to go above our allocation in a line. And we have done that as a group around this table. And now we're in a favorable position where we're funded similar to our coterminous boards, and that has been a windfall for us. The other one is that this board, in an aggressive and well-supported move, was said that we were going to go a year in advance with full-day kindergarten to potentially protect our market share, and that had huge implications for us. So from my perspective, we don't see those types of clouds lining up. What I see is a very difficult cloud lining up is a provincial collective bargaining, and that's something that we will not have total control around this table with, and we will be responding to what happens. So I just want to be aware of this, that usually the decisions that have created the pressure have been decisions that we have made to either transportation to protect our market share or competing in our communities to make sure that are brands out there that people will choose. That has cost us dearly on a couple of occasions. And those, right now, I report to you, I think, from this perspective, are under control.
Go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
I guess my, if I look at it and trying to review it every month, I don't want to get into a situation where we go back in time and, previous, way back in time, where boards would look at the check register and say, okay, we approve this check, we approve that check. I guess what I'm trying to bring to light is, what should we be doing to make sure that we're spending the dollars that we need to spend, and what can we hold back on in the next little while to make sure that we don't run into those situations? It might be the earthquake, it might be whatever, but I think if we were to discuss it at every meeting, it could turn into an event in itself to say, we shouldn't have done that, we shouldn't have done this. That's not where I want to try and move this. I'm thinking, do we set a threshold in place and say, anything over a certain level, we need to have a little bit deeper dive on it. But I also need to make sure that we don't handcuff administration. I mean, if we have spending limits in place for individuals, we have spending limits, they have to get approved at different levels. All I'm saying is that we add on to that internal policy and say, if there's a spending that's going to take place at a certain level, maybe we need to see it first. For a short-term basis until we know that we're out of the woods. Again, I keep coming back to where we were last year. I'm not predicting the earthquake or the hurricane, but we need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence, that we don't end up in that situation. We don't have the luxury of wiggling by and being compliant right now. We don't have a lot of gap to be able to do that. So that's where I think we need to be. My struggle is, what's the limit? Should I suggest a limit of a dollar amount and see whether it's legitimate, whether it's reasonable for administration to work with, or do we have further discussion? I'm thinking if we set a limit in at $100,000, we need to know that. Is it $500,000? Maybe it's $1 million. What is that limit, I guess, is what I struggle with. And maybe that's where I'm falling down and trying to explain that. Is I think we need to add to the process that we have internally to make sure that we justify if we need to move forward with it over the next period of time until we know what our revenue situation is.
So what you want to make sure is that we're not put in a position that we can't come back from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really, perhaps the dollar amount really isn't important, and what really is important is the percentage of budget spend. So if I look at our tiny line, we have planned expenditures, and as long as they don't say go over 50% of the annual allocated budget, then I still have the balance to recover from, right? I mean, because I'm trying to think, I'm trying to think of how you do this, and the other one was much easier, I think, getting my head around how you look at hiring. It's black and white. It's more binary, I guess, than this. This is, if it costs $100,000 to buy toilet paper, we've got to buy that toilet paper. I'm sure they're already at single ply. So, I'm trying to think that through and how you would set up. And I know that I can't imagine that you're trying to be punitive. It's just trying to create a culture of, hey, you know what, until we understand exactly where our expenditures are, let's be a little careful. And I get that, but I also want to make sure that it's workable. So I don't know, maybe that is, or maybe David, you can suggest something, or somebody else can help us out. That gives us some latitude that allows us to go through this. I'm going to go to McPherson, Trustee McPherson, and I'll come to you, Dave.
When I first became a trustee, we would approve meeting the monthly expenditures. My only concern here is that we could be in danger of trying to micromanage the budget. There is a reason why we have an administrative section and an elected section to the Upper Canada District School Board. And I see the rationalization because nobody likes to be in a position of non-compliance. It's a very uncomfortable position. And I'm struggling like the rest of you as to what the limitations should be. I think a sense of awareness of what could be facing us on the horizon, like these things just don't pop up in front of you. There's always some indication as what's coming. The negotiations are going to be a big one. So we know what our facilities needs are. So I just don't want us to step onto that slippery slope that leads to micromanaging from the Board of Trustees. That's just a comment, and that's some of the things I'm struggling with down here.
Trustee, David?
First of all, I understand this debate, and with 11 balanced budgets, and our last one being a real tough one to get to, and let's remember that was because of some decisions we made around this table, and when you didn't have money, and we went into all day, it certainly played out well this year because, we certainly had a startup that was much more balanced and well organized than some of our other boards that you guys know all the stories about. But I understand what Trustee McDonald saying this is that we just don't want a surprise here and then scrambling in March and April and May to say let's put this let's put this back in the box. And so I got to let you know from our side, with the reputation of balanced budgets that we're very proud of, and I think you guys are proud of that, is that we're taking this very seriously. And I think that we have to come back once a month, as you've talked about, and our regular audit reports. We have the audit after audit, and David, you chair those. Is that if we think we have to have a deeper dive, you're going to see a real level of transparency. We don't want a surprise. One of our surprises last year was a budget line that schools were sitting on money that came back to hurt us on another line, and we're already out auditing schools to make sure that surprise doesn't come back and get us again. But I think that the group around this table, the professionals and in their accounting departments and in each of our areas, is very cognizant of no surprises. And as I said earlier, a couple of things are two things. One, transportation's in fine shape. The competing for every child as we have over the year, we do that in a comprehensive way. And I think we're taking a very hard look at school-based budgets to make sure that we don't have something that hangs over here and has a negative impact. So I think this has caught the attention, but I guarantee you before this, the surprise impact is where I go back to something I said before at the risk of repeating myself. I think the big implications will be the provincial bargaining and the implications that has for us as we move forward in 2015, 2016, etc. And may I just one other thing, and Chair, please indulge. I think that's why at OPSPA, and I think very loud from my perspective, that everything be funded and that everything is provincial. You may remember, trustees, one of the things that this board has been stuck with and it hangs around as heavy is in-school monitors, because there was in the collective bargaining. David, you were the chair at the time. Mr. Kennedy phoned and said the money would flow. It has never flown since, and for 11 years we have in-school monitors because we could not deliver on the budget of supervision, and we've had to do that beyond the cost. And that would be a surprise that would have a negative impact as it would come out through bargaining. So we're going to watch this very, very closely, and the message that as a board of trustees that we are proud of how we manage the tax dollars in Eastern Ontario, and we'll continue to do that. And if we see something that's scary on the horizon, I believe we have to bring it to your attention very, very quickly, and then be prepared to deal with it. And I think the idea of looking, as we do, at budget lines to say how much is their verse is direction that we will take.
So,
Through you, Chair?
yeah, go ahead, Trustee Swan.
I'd just like to ask a question of the director in regards to the underspending of some of the schools that he just recently brought up. Are we going to get a report on this, or what they're doing to improve spending in the schools and to use what they've been budgeted for?
Yeah, the school surpluses.
We had one report on that, Tracy May, when we came back with Lori Mackler, and I have commissioned the two of them to go back out and do a quick study of spots in our system about the school-based spending, and that will be happening in the next 4 weeks.
Trustee
Thank you so
Gardner?
much.
I'm just wondering if some of Trustee McDonald's concerns would not be coming to us through the reports that we're going to receive on a quarterly basis. Is that not soon enough?
Go ahead.
Well, sometimes it's hard for people to understand my thinking, but me being one of them. I need to clarify a few things first. My thought process is not to question the integrity of individuals or the justification of what we may be needing to spend. My thought process is to say, at a certain level, we need to have a sober second thought, because, as the director pointed out, if we go through this process, through the course of a year, school year, we get a quarterly report, and we find out that we have a surprise 6 months into the year, but we have spent 80% of our budget, and that impact is going to be greater than the 20% that's still remaining. That 20% remaining may already have commitments. So all I'm saying is that as we progress, and if we can have something in developed as a process, that it comes to us as quickly as possible, as far as those surprises may happen, we may have expended a huge majority of our money and have commitments for the remaining balance, and have no way to deal with what those surprises might be. And we are at that threshold that we don't have a lot of money sitting in our back pockets that we can get ourselves out of trouble. So that's my fear, that we would be in those types of situations. And all I'm suggesting is that as we move into this process, the school year, knowing where we are for enrollment in another month and a half, we should be looking at some of those expenses before we get too far down the road into the school year, before we make commitments on that spending. It's not a question of the validity of the spending. It's not a question of mismanagement of our departments. It's not a question of the integrity. It's just trying to be fiduciary, have the fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we are putting the money in the best places at the particular time with all the facts that we know. And if we don't have all the facts, sometimes we have to justify why we're spending the money. That's kind of where I'm going.
So, is it possible to generate a report based on the projected spending for the next 30 days?
Would you repeat that, please?
Is it possible, is that because you weren't listening?
No, I was listening, but
okay.
why the
All right.
share with the question?
Good. That was a shot. Is it possible to get a report that outlines the projected expending for the next X number of days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
It's not something that we do regularly. It's only possible by soliciting that information from each and every budget owner. And we would have to do that every month.
Would that be onerous?
That would be
Okay.
onerous. It would.
Trustee McDonald?
We don't have a crystal ball, and a lot of our expenses are committed. We have salaries that we have to pay on a regular basis. We'd be spending time and energy to do something that we just can't control anyway. Rather than having a limit on what we're going to spend or our particular expense, we put a motion in place that indicates that if the expense is greater than the budgeted amount, that it needs to come to us automatically.
Okay.
First of all, this is reasonable. this discussion, don't think at our end of the table saying, you know, this is reasonable. And I think what I understand, if I'm correct, through your chair to Trustee McDonald, you're looking for a ballpark thumbnail sketch is a risk. So, I mean, for us to go to all the budget people and say, you know, I need this for tomorrow, that would be owners. But we could take the major ones and in the thumbnail look and say, because if we had done that with going back to our schools spending their money, we just said, gone out to 5 or 6 of the schools and done, you know, a quick look at them, we'd have given a thumbnail set saying, hey, we gotta look at this deeper. So I don't think this is unreasonable. What might be unreasonable is thinking we could give you real accuracy. But if you're saying we want a thumbnail of risk, I think that was something that we could talk. In fact, I use that all the time. In fact, I will, with Nancy, say, you know, should I be happy with these following things? She says, yes, and this one, and I'll do a dive to dig in and see what the issue here as we go through. And we're becoming better. So it's just not unreasonable. I think it's finding out, I think I hear you saying this, you're not trying to create something that, you know, all of a sudden, you know, we're counting pennies. But you are saying, is there potential for a looming issue that the board should be aware of so we can make some appropriate decisions? And I think that what I'd like to do, with your permission, is take this and come back and tell you how I think we can do it. Because I think we're starting to do it right now.
I think you've gone a step beyond that now with the idea that essentially what you're asking for right now is any budget that goes over the budgeted amount needs to come to the board table for approval.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna go out and buy new carpet and we budgeted $1,000 and it's coming in at 2, it needs to come back to us. That's a real, I'm being facetious, but.
Well, can I, being a facetious line through you, Chair, I think if we think we're going out to buy, you know, 7,000 computers, and we find out that it's gone wild, and we can't do this, I think going back to the thumbnail, is that we may not have the exact number, we're gonna say, but this is a risk. Now, this is something we wanted to do, and it's at risk, and I think the board deserves to know. I think that's something that can be done. I think the carpet, as you were saying, is probably a good example. We thought we'd get it for 1,000, it's come at 1,700, this is risk, what do we do?
Okay, but just before we go down that path, I'd be surprised, being a very small budget owner, if I phoned up and said, you know, my budget's going over, thanks a lot, you're gonna have to cover it. Like, I think do you not already have something in place that triggers if there's a budget line goes over its allocated amount? The right answer, I hope, is yes.
We don't have software configured to do that, but we do have processes in place where there's a check on, do you have the budget before we process a purchase order, for example.
Through you, Chair?
Just 1 second, Trustee Swan.
So, if we move into the direction that if something is going over budget, then, and I'm not suggesting that we have to approve that purchase, but we need to know where's that gap going to be covered. So that's the heads up kind of scenario. And if we circle around what we budgeted for, then we're not trying to look through the needle or look for that needle in the haystack. So I think if by circling back into what our budget is on a particular item, if it's a percentage over, then we need to know about it, and what's the contingency to deal with the gap.
All right, that gets a little more specific. Trustee Swan?
Well, we have a procurement bylaw in place, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We do. Is that not correct?
Yep.
And so if a division of the board goes 25% over, perhaps it could be brought back to the board table. Would that be appropriate?
That's essentially what Trustee McDonald is saying.
Yeah, I'm concurring with him.
But any budget line that goes over, that a report comes to board detailing the fact that A, it has gone over, and B, what is the response to deal with the overage? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, with a limit. I'm not necessarily thinking anything for $100 needs to come back, you know.
I mean, we don't have budget lines that would be just $100, right?
Well,
I don't think. So go ahead.
Yeah. I'm worried about getting into the deep drill here because we have budgets that I can tell you right now are gonna be over significantly because that's the way we run our schools. For example, we have a budget line with office administrators that is hugely over budgeted because of legislation and because of the funding formula and so forth that we have to play and dicker with all the time, and that washes out in our staffing process as you go through. And that's no surprise. I mean, the people around this table know that when you have a series of small schools and you have 86 kids in the school and you got a full-time principal, you got a full-time office administrator, that's not how they fund you. They fund you in lots of 1,000 as you go through. So I guess going back to the original discussion, if what we're worried about is a surprise, let's deal with a surprise. We have a number of budget lines that will be over, and it will not be a surprise. And the trustees have a right to know about it, and the trustees have a right to know about the occasional teacher line, which often will go over in a difficult year of flus and different things of that nature and so forth. Those are all things that we're always managing. I guess where I'm at is, and I guess as I've listened to the debate, is I think what I've heard is that we don't ascend accounting to say, well, this budget's at 97% over, and we find that it's $100,000 budget line. I mean, you know, if we, on some minuscule thing that we're over because of that, because I'll tell you right now, living with accountants, they may not, they need a little more direction because they'll come back and say, well, this budget's 970% over, and it's a budget that meant nothing to the system as you go through, nor the operations, nor the quality or effectiveness of our schools. But something like a change, and I bring the example up, a policy change by the provincial government that says this is how you're going to do supervision. That's cost us millions of dollars on a budget line that we were never given money for. So I just wanted to say that be careful what you ask for because you might just get it.
But I want to make sure that, I think, David, I don't think we're asking for a report. Like, I think, like, if you say that we go over on office administrators, that was budgeted for,
Yes, it
right?
was. Yes, it was.
And we're not asking you to conform to the funding line. We're asking you to conform to the budget that we passed in
Good.
June. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
And
Yeah.
I don't want $2.
Okay, good. I know, I hear you.
so if our budget
Okay.
as a trustee is 400,000 is our budget line, then, and we're going to 430, you want to know that that's going on, and if we're going to allow it, how we're going to make up for the 30,000 that we're over. That's essentially what you're asking. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think Superintendent Barkley's breathing better. I think there's something that we could do here because we want to do it.
Now, one of the things, if we had a surplus, this would be less of a concern, right? If we had a accumulated surplus. So we get back to the accumulated surplus, then it just becomes a lot less. Trustee McPherson?
So, through the chair, so what I'm sensing here is that we're trying to create a sense of acute awareness as to developments in the budget as we go along. Not so much control, but if we have a curveball thrown at us, that we are given the opportunity to react. So that satisfies my previous concerns.
Now, what would be, like, what's the range of budget lines out there, like, in terms of scale? Do we have $100 budget lines? So what would be the smallest budget line that we have?
In individual budgets, department budgets, you could have a budget line that has $5,000. It really varies.
Do we want department budgets? Do you want to do it that way, or do you want to do an amount?
Well, again, even from the amount standpoint, I mean, a $5,000 budget and 1% over is not very much, right? So it's really, we're going to see a lot of information. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the big stuff, the big ticket stuff that's going to get us. And, you know, department budgets gives us more big ticket stuff, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to be reasonable, but I also want to make sure that we have an opportunity to see it so that if there is an overage, that's fine, it may have to happen, but then.
I think department budgets would make sense, just because I know that even in allocating expenses, sometimes it's even a question of which line you're gonna put it in, right? Like, sometimes expenses can be two, like it can be a meeting expense and it also could be a PD expense, and so probably department budgets.
Department budgets, and I think if we set a percentage level, because, I mean, if it's 1%, I think that's pretty well recoverable, but
Well, you use 3 in your, for the similar process that we have for construction.
David, through you, Chair, this is the big rock stuff that you're talking about, David, and I think that's reasonable.
You know, for an agenda that didn't have anything on it, it made me work really hard. It goes above. What percentage? 3% of its allocation.
budget allocation, not funding, right? That's what you're gonna allocate.
Department budget line that exceeds 3% of its allocation. Motion to request the director report any budget line that exceeds 3% of its allocation, along with source of funds to cover, or how do I want to phrase that?
Contingency plan?
Yeah,
Along with
the appropriate remedy.
May I add to that, please?
Sure.
3% of its allocation if it's a $10,000 budget, because do we really want to deal with a budget that's $1,000 that's going to $1,300?
Yeah, no, that's why we've elevated it to department budget, so that's putting us into hundreds of thousands. There wouldn't
Okay.
be department budgets much under, there wouldn't be many under $500,000, would there?
Okay, thank you.
Motion to request the director report, the committee of the whole or the board? The committee of the whole? Any department budget line that exceeds 3% of its allocation along with an appropriate remedy. Do we need it within so many days, or just, I think we can count on the,
Well, I think we've
to be expeditious.
picked up the acuteness of this conversation. Super important.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, just a question of clarification.
Mhm.
When you use the word line,
yep, give me
we
a better
don't mean
one.
lines within a department budget, we mean
No,
the department
complete budget.
budget total,
Yes.
because there will be fluctuations with
Okay,
it.
so department budget total, is that the best way to
Just
describe
the
it?
Department budget.
That's even better. Fewer words are always better.
Thank you.
Tracy. I think John taught me that.
It's your fault, wasn't it?
By example. Okay, so motion to request. Okay. Motion to request the director to report report to the committee of the whole any department budget that exceeds 3% of its allocation, along with an appropriate remedy. Any comments or questions about that? Huh. All right. Moved by trustee McDonald, seconded by trustee McMillan. And if that's it, let's call the question. Logging out. Okay, so everybody's in favor. So that passes unanimously. All right, are we done with that item? Okay, horse is dead. Director's left, so I guess he doesn't have any comments. Welcome back, everybody. This last few months of our term, and it's going to be exciting. And I don't think he's got anything. Does he have anything to add? Where did he go? Let's give him a second. Isn't taking his phone. So. Anybody have any comments? Anybody want to add an agenda item? Anybody want to sing?
Can I give a kick for something I'm doing in November here, or is that inappropriate?
No,
No, it's not inappropriate, or no, you can't, or
no, it's not inappropriate.
go ahead.
No, just want to remind you that we're getting into the last stages of our Champions for Kids fundraiser.
Yeah, okay.
At the Mason Theatre in Perth. We've got quite a lineup. We have 6-time East Coast Music Award winner Jason Cook from Nova Scotia.
Cool.
We have Lanark County's own Kelly Sloan from Almont. We have Country Music Hall of Fame winner Howard Hayes and the Country Drifters. And we're bringing in a folk and bluegrass band called the Richmond Ramblers, with a special guest performance by Upper Canada's own Tony Leduc. Tickets are $12.50 a piece. We're keeping the price down so everybody can enjoy themselves. They will be available online when we get everything into place. PayPal, Interact will take your money, whatever form it comes in. We're lining up a silent auction, and we also have a commissioned school-based painting, which will be auctioned off to the audience that evening. So November the 8th, mark it in your calendars, and hope to see you there.
All right.
Good job.
Yes, Director, do you have
Job,
any comments?
I do. I was,
It's a good thing we waited.
after the debate, we had a long debate. I'll leave it there. I'd like to bring to your attention, I've sent a letter out to all the principals in all the schools, and I hope that you have seen it. We made some big decisions several years ago to move forward with our full-day kindergarten a year in advance. And there's no other jurisdiction in Ontario that really looks at market share the way we did. We bussed when we didn't have the money. We did full-day kindergarten when we didn't have the money. We did all kinds of things to ensure that our schools were viable, relevant, and meaningful. And you know the history of our labor relations, what we've done with our schools to keep them open, to serve our needy families. We've done some marvelous things. But this school year, I appreciate Trustee McAllister's words about the new change, is that we have really focused the energy of this system, of this district, on our schools. We had a tremendous kickoff in Kingston, where we had all of our leaders together, and we had a very, very different series of leadership activities. Our CAPS controlled much of the agenda at that, and we've had a marvelous start to the school year. But I'd like to also draw attention to Jeremy's department, the men and women who prepared our schools for all these changes. You've probably read some of the horror stories about other boards using church basements and different places to house their kindergartens, and you're hearing stories of backlogs of 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 and 15 months to have places ready. We have come in online in a very powerful way, and I'm deeply appreciative of the men and women in facility services, the leadership that you've displayed, Jeremy, Peter and his group, and the men and women who make sure that those things happen. We have some places that are not ready, but we knew they would not be with how things were going. And I have been to many of those sites in the last 3 weeks, and I'm told that they're all on time and they're all on budget. And I think that we should have a great deal of pride in what has happened. We have worked hard to gain the confidence of our communities in well-funded public education. And the fact is, even tonight in our rich and very important debate, to be, prudent and thoughtful with taxpayers' dollars. And at the same time, we did that with a backdrop of having effective schools. That it's not just done because we want to be thrifty, it's done because we're going to be wise with our dollars and pay attention to them. So I want you, when you have an opportunity, when you're in the schools, and many of you do, is to thank the men and women who got it ready, because it was a superb startup. I hope that when I knock on wood now, that means the rest of the next couple of weeks go just as well. But I'd like to bring our attention to some fabulous work. So thank you very much for giving me that opportunity to say a few words.
All right, thank you. And that brings to an end our meeting for September 10th. And look for a motion to adjourn. That's Trustee McMillan and Trustee McPherson. And you go ahead and take your vote, and we'll see you for the next board meeting in 2 weeks.
I added a positive note, a very positive note.
I thought the whole meeting was positive.
It was, but this is more positive.
All right, the meeting's over, I hope you know. But